My interest in the airport commission came from my interest in aviation as a private pilot. I have my single engine land and sea rating, although I don't fly seaplanes very often. You don't see many seaplanes in California. And I also have my instrument rating, which allows me to fly in inclement weather in the clouds. I am here today because Bill Theringer, one of your board members, invited me, and we're both members of the Santa Barbara Amateur Radio Club and Wireless Foundation. And that also ties into a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today related to aviation technology and the airport. My background is in education. I have a Ph.D. in education from UCSB, and I was a teacher for a long time. My current project is a documentary film that was released last year on PBS called Pathways to Invention. It profiles what a dozen inventors, young inventors between 25 and 40 around the US, and sort of the problems that they took, that they decided to take up in their lives, and the inventions that they created to address those challenges. So that QR code will bring you to a free streaming link where you can grab, where you can watch it. And you could also grab a card from me at the end. I've got that same QR code on this card as well. A little bit about the Santa Barbara Airport. It's owned and operated by the city of Santa Barbara. It was built by the Marine Corps many years ago in support of the effort in World War II is when it really came into being. And after the war, it was turned over to the city of Santa Barbara to operate. It's an enterprise fund, which I think is really interesting. You'll hear people say, oh, there's our tax dollars at work. Well, in this unique case, even though it's owned by the city, no city funds are used to fund the airport, meaning your taxes that you pay for property taxes or sales tax or any other tax that the city or county collects is not going to fund the airport. It's actually fully self-sustaining as a business. And likewise, money that comes in through the airport, any profits or gains that the airport has at the end of the year don't go back into the city's general fund. In fact, much of the airport is funded by federal grants. So I guess you could say it's your federal tax dollars at work, but not your local tax dollars. The area is it was almost 1,000 acres at what was once the Goleta Slough is now mostly landfill. And you know, when you're coming off of the 217 exit there, and there's that pipe facility with underground gas storage, that hill there was much, much taller years ago before the airport was filled in, before the slough was filled in to make the airport. And that's the land that they used to fill in the airport. So the geography was very different. In fact, if you look at the seal of the city of Santa Barbara, which I don't have on the screen here, but if you know what it looks like, it shows ships sailing into an inland waterway. And in my mind, I always think that must have been Goleta Slough back in the day, because that would have been more like what it looked like. Today, obviously, it looks a little bit different. It's a unique airport in that it's relatively small. There's not other airports around here. We're not like Burbank, where we're a feeder airport or satellite airport, I should say, for Los Angeles area. But we are fortunate to have 5 commercial carriers: Delta, Southwest, Alaska, American, and United Airlines currently serving the airport. And occasionally we'll have other airlines come in seasonally with different offerings. Business jets, like general aviation, GA's general aviation, so non-commercial scheduled service and flight training all happen at the airport. But another interesting thing is that in addition to being aviation focused, the airport is also one of the biggest landlords in Goleta, in that it operates 173,000 square feet of office, retail, and storage space. So one of the things that we deal with on the Airport Commission is not just aviation related and airline related, but it's also related to the revenue generating that happens through the city's ownership and leasing of property that has often very little to do, if nothing to do, with aviation. Although the priority is to try to find and support aviation related businesses, particularly those that are on the airfield. So if they have access to the field, or for example, there's a large redevelopment project happening now on the north side of the field near the tower off of Hollister. And part of that is to serve business jets and general aviation through fixed base operators, or businesses that support general aviation. And so you'll see some redevelopment happening there. The Elephant Bar is what was the Elephant Bar is under redevelopment right now in the short term to be a restaurant, to be actually support food trucks and sort of an open concept public market idea. So you'll be seeing that coming in the fall as well. So there's related things to aviation related businesses and non-aviation related businesses that lease space from the airport. This is the coming up. Yes, there we go. This is a aeronautical chart that shows Santa Barbara Airport, how it's situated. It's a Class Charlie airport, Class C. So that in aviation, we rate the airports or rank the airports based on how busy they are, the volume of traffic, and then the type of air traffic services. Without getting into too much detail about it, it just means that it's a mid-sized airport. San Luis Obispo, by comparison, is a Class Delta airport. So we have Bravo, Charlie, Delta. A Bravo airport would be an airport like Los Angeles or New York, JFK, and a Charlie airport's a mid-sized airport like Santa Barbara Airport. It's actually on the smaller end of the Charlie sized airport. And then the Deltas are Oxnard, Camarillo, San Luis Obispo. On the chart here, you'll see that it's listed different numbers. You got 40 SFC, 40, 15. That means that different types of airspace and how the tower and radar controllers handle that traffic within those different envelopes. So sometimes you'll hear people, and we'll talk a little bit more later about how the technology relates to noise abatement, but you'll hear people say, well, how do we get different flight patterns? How can we get airliners and business jets to fly in certain ways? And there's some things that are within the control of air traffic controllers and some things that are not in within the possibility for them to control. And I'll try to answer some questions about that because I know a lot of people in the community, particularly in Goleta, have concerns about noise abatement and what can be done to, as the airport continues to grow, make sure that it doesn't infringe on our quality of life here in the community. This is an overview of like a top-down airport diagram that shows what the airport looks like. There's 3 runways. We have runway 7/25, which just means it's an east-west oriented. It's on a heading of either 070 or 70 degrees, or in the other direction, 250 degrees or 25. That's how the airport runway numbers work. So the east-west runway, running left to right on your screen, is the main runway that the airlines use. And then there's 2 parallel runways, and they're the dark black lines running parallel north to south. And they're labeled runways 15 left, 15 right, and inversely, they're known as runway 33. That's heading 150 going south and heading 330 going almost due north. There's a plan in the future potentially to close one of those parallel runways and expand what we call the apron or the ramp over by the terminal building and turn part of the runway 15 left, which I know you guys on Zoom can't see what I'm pointing at, but this is runway 15 left. I'll try to, if you can see my, oh yeah, you can see my cursor. This is runway 15 left. Potentially in the future, in the next 5 to 10 years, probably less than 10, to close runway 15 left and expand the apron and allow for more overnight aircraft storage, larger aircraft, and just more space to work. We don't have the volume of traffic at Santa Barbara Airport at the moment, and probably likely not in the future, to support three runways for federal funding. So in all likelihood, federal funding for that runway 15 left will dry up, and it won't be economically feasible to maintain it any longer, at which point we'll find another use for it. Another thing that I think sometimes gets forgotten about what an airport can bring to a community is not just business jets and travelers and tourism and access for businesses, but also what general aviation brings to a community is often an intangible benefit, particularly in an emergency. So when we have a situation like the COVID pandemic followed by wildfires in the Pacific Northwest, I wanted to show a quick video here from Direct Relief that I was involved with this effort to airlift supplies to firefighters in Oregon who were dealing with inability to just even buy masks at the time to stop the ash from breathing in the ash. And there was just shortages, as you may remember. This was, I believe it was the summer of 2020 or September 2020, so just the end of the summer. And the only way to get things was through organizations like Direct Relief, who were had stores of these supplies that they were saving for an example for a situation just like this. So hopefully everybody will be able to see it.
By 1,000 for Flight Los Angeles Departure Radar contact, climb maintain 13,000.
Flight 527, runway 8 kilo, you're cleared for takeoff.
Bad news is so easy to find these days, and to see this group of men and women who just on their own, in their own initiative, in 48 hours pulled together a pretty intense logistics operation from pilots all over the state is quite inspiring. 40 planes, 23 of which are landing in Santa Barbara today, to either fly directly or ferry with other members.
It's just tremendously fulfilling. You know, the fires all over the West have burned up so much forest, caused so much misery and unhealthy conditions for people, coming on the back of COVID affecting all 50 states. This is a crazy year. All of us participating today are really thrilled to be able to help.
Well, I got a call a couple of days ago from our executive director in Santa Monica who had asked if I could take this flight. But a chance to fly his supplies is, you know, manna from heaven.
We're flying medical supplies and all around Oregon where historic fires have been burning all across the state. And when we get there, we're going to meet a team at the airport in Eugene from Reach Out Worldwide.
This is California conditions. We're getting this east wind and it's 90 degrees on the southern coast of Oregon. Absolutely unheard of. I don't think in my 15 years that I've been there that we've ever seen anything like that. It's just a really difficult time right now for all of Oregon. Reach Out Worldwide is going to go out and they're going to help you as soon as possible after a natural disaster, anywhere in the world. A lot of these supplies that you guys have brought up, they're going to go out to like some of these smaller camps that aren't maybe necessarily getting the attention, not getting the needed supplies out there, so they're going to help people. And that's what we do, and that's what I'm all about, is going out and helping people.
Organizations like Direct Relief is vital into our overall mission success, because without support from you guys and from supporters everywhere, none of this can happen.
That organization that they work with, Reach Out Worldwide, is the actor Paul Walker. He started that organization. His brother Cody Walker runs it now. And that's the kinds of things they do, is go into disaster areas and coordinate things. Direct Relief is more logistics on a large scale. Reach Out Worldwide was the recipient of those supplies. And then after they were handed off from the general aviation pilots to the scene, then they were distributed by Reach Out Worldwide to the various firefighting activities. So another thing that I participated in during our own mudslide disaster in 2018, I guess it was, 2019. Obviously, the 101 freeway was closed, and so we weren't able to get to Ventura. And many of our firefighters, nurses, doctors live in Ventura, work in Santa Barbara, and vice versa. And so you had people who were trapped. 3.5-hour drive isn't really viable. Some people, I had, my wife's a nurse at the hospital, and we had one of her work friends and colleagues gave birth the night before the mudslide. And so her husband went home and then couldn't get back the next day because they lived in Ventura, and she was Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, and he was trapped on the other side of the mudslide. I ended up flying from Santa Barbara Airport to Oxnard Airport to bring her and her baby home to Ventura. We called it the land bridge at the time. And it was it began as an ad hoc group of pilots just for the purpose of bringing first responders and anyone who really had an urgent need to get across county lines and get across that affected area by general aviation. So it's really a vital resource to a community to have an airport to be able to do things like that. And on the Airport Commission, we're trying to look at all of the interests and balance them all to make sure that we are protecting the community in that way. Let me see why I can't get to the next. There we go. I thought this was a really interesting chart when we received it at the Airport Commission last fall, or sort of a year-end summary of what growth looked like. And you'll see, I think that the terminal building was finished 2011 or 2012, right about here. And you'll see that there was actually sort of a decline in, this is passenger count, so number of passengers. I think it's in plane, so how many people got on airplanes in Santa Barbara Airport. And you'll see there was like a decline. So I think people were, I don't know, Paul, were people thinking, hey, why did we build this terminal? We're actually seeing a decline in passengers.
We're very nervous.
Yeah, I mean, we built this multi-million-dollar terminal, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, the trend is trending down. When's that going to stop? And then it starts to trend up in 2016. 2019 we were doing pretty well, all-time high. And then, of course, the COVID pandemic hit, dropped off precipitously. And then since the COVID pandemic, we've seen, numbers that approach 40%, or maybe even double what we were seeing in the early years around the time of the terminal. So we're up over 1.2 million passengers enplaned in Santa Barbara at Santa Barbara Airport. So there's definitely demand and growth, and we're seeing that reflected in revenue. We're seeing that reflected in demand by the airlines for flights. And as part of that, there's a terminal improvement project which will expand the terminal further. It's hard to believe that we're almost 14 years into this. The existing terminal is not really the new terminal building any longer, and so the plan is to expand it further south, take over some of that land that had historically been used for general aviation. Flight schools were down there heading toward Toledo Beach, and turn that into usable space. This is another short video that I thought gave a good explanation of the terminal improvement project.
I think enhancing and improving an airport like Santa Barbara is extremely crucial.
The terminal improvement project is taking into account my son's unique needs and the unique needs of all people with disabilities.
Traveling with kids can be such a challenge. You come in and you get through ticketing in a breeze, security's easy. The Santa Barbara Airport, it's starting at such a good level that I think the terminal improvement project will just bring it to that next level.
The Terminal Improvement Project is really designed to maintain our ease of use and passenger experience here at Santa Barbara.
Over the past 10 years, there have been areas that we've seen need improvement.
Certain times it becomes too crowded and you don't have the space to sit down, you don't have the places to eat. Escalators that currently conflict with each other, baggage claim area that isn't quite big enough.
During busy times, we have passengers going up to TSA screening and going down to baggage claim. So it's a point of congestion here. This project will allow us to address those issues to make it more accessible.
The terminal improvement project is really important to me. I am the mother of Theo, who is 21 and he has Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and I am a board member of the Alpha Resource Center of Santa Barbara. I know when I'm pushing my son in his wheelchair, we're a bit of a wide load. There has to be a lot of open space.
The terminal improvement project is going to add roughly 30,000 square feet to the terminal. We're going to add boarding area so there's more seating space for our passengers. And then also up in the second floor area, we're going to be having a pet relief area. We're going to improve the ticketing check-in area. We are going to be bumping out this wall roughly 10 feet and enlarge the baggage claim area.
We're really looking forward to room for the kids to roam. They have nursing facilities right now, but with the terminal improvement project, they're going to have built-out space for nursing parents and young families.
We have outdoor dining that is going to be going in, which also helps to relieve the amount of passengers in the main terminal. If you're a resident of the Santa Barbara region, we are really doing this terminal improvement project to benefit you from the open air facilities and relaxing vibe that you have, being able to find a seat, being able to find something good to eat, not being crowded, making it through security quickly and easily.
It's going to have that easy feeling, that's accommodating feel, providing that high level of service that we intend.
Being part of the local business community, I've been to over 100 airports across the world. And Santa Barbara definitely stands out as one of the most beautifully designed airports in the world. How many airports have you been to? Because there's this humongous mountain on one side and the picturesque coastal landscape on the other. It captivates your imagination the first time you land into Santa Barbara Airport.
Maintaining the current vibe of Santa Barbara Airport to match the city of Santa Barbara and our community is very important to us.
And the terminal has this beautiful Spanish colonial revival architecture.
We've hired professional architects to understand our existing facility, and then we also have brought in some of the staff that was originally a part of the first design 12 years ago.
I fly out of the Santa Barbara Airport like at least twice a week. It serves as a convenient way to just get out. I think enhancing and improving an airport like Santa Barbara is extremely crucial. Part of this seamless and frictionless experience that I'm really looking forward to.
Another project that on sort of the other end of the spectrum of complexity, I guess, although it is more complex than you would think, but a much smaller project that could benefit the community directly are the General Western Aero hangars, which are located on Fairview over by like the FedEx building, right?
Fairview and Hollister.
Fairview and Hollister on the corner, just before you get to the FedEx hangar there where the sign is on Fairview. These were built before World War II, I guess, right? Yeah. These were built a long time ago and are showing their age. And there's quite a few members in the community who'd like to see these not just demolished, but preserved. And I think the current airport director, Chris Hastert, made a really great decision when he said that why don't we as the airport offer this to the community for ideas, find out what people would like to do with it, and then allocate the funds that we would have to use to demolish them towards supporting something that could actually be built that would be sustaining and good for the community. So here are some of the ideas that came up during last year's public use community forums, what people have suggested. 28% of the respondents wanted to see it used as a roller skating rink, which is sort of unique, but clearly the standout lead idea for it. Aeronautical Museum was second place. Concert venue, public market, auto museum. There's a group that's pushing to have it to be an auto museum. Education center, those were the other 7 to 10% of the respondents wanted to see those things. And then a smaller number of people had different ideas. 2-3-4% of people said makerspace, children's center, a community workspace, an event space, more hangars for general aviation, basketball courts, and I guess they got more hangars in there twice. So this was 58 votes. It wasn't a huge sample, but you can see there's a number of ideas, and it's going to come down to which one benefits the community the most and who can show up with the funding to actually make something happen there. So it'll be cool to see what happens with the General Western Aero hangars and if we can preserve that little bit of history. If you live in Goleta, then you know about noise abatement. And you probably, I know I was talking to a couple people in the room before the meeting started about what is the airport doing to address noise abatement. And that's where some of this technology can get interesting. I've got a box of surprise over here that I'll share in just a minute about tracking airplanes, but looking at the airport keeps track of noise complaints as they come in. We have a system that logs different noise complaints based on their location, so we can see where the affected areas are. If you look at this map starting on the lower State Street, you can see in the bottom right, there's a small number of complaints that come in there. But most of the complaints come in from beginning along the coast on the Mesa through Hope Ranch, and then the majority of them are within 4 miles of the center of the airport. And I know that the Airport Commission has received complaints, both in-person written complaints that folks have shown up to voice their displeasure with early morning departures and late night arrivals and the disruption that they cause to sleep. And there are some things that, like I said at the beginning, that are within the control of the airport, and many things that are outside the control of what the city can do and what the Airport Commission can do as far as recommending solutions to the city council and to the airport staff. But again, there are a few ideas that are circulating right now to develop what we call approaches, which is a flight pattern that pilots can fly when they are when they're coming into Santa Barbara Airport. And the goal is to develop approved flight patterns or approaches that pilots can use that keep them offshore longer. Now, it doesn't do anything to prevent an early morning departure, but what it does do is keep those arrivals offshore longer so that they are not flying over many of the areas that are that you're seeing along the southeast corner of the screen there, the bottom right corner of the screen. I think you'll hear some people say, well, you moved near an airport, what did you expect? But when many of us moved near an airport, the airport wasn't functioning in the way that it is today. And we're seeing that growth, and we're saying, okay, well, it's great that we're bringing in more tourism dollars, that we're more enticing to businesses, but what does that mean for quality of life in our community, and how can we balance those interests? And that's something that I think many of the members of the staff, as well as the Airport Commission and the City Council, are keenly aware of and working to try to find solutions like some of these additional approaches that we can develop in cooperation with the airline to try to mitigate a lot of that airplane noise that people are hearing at all hours of the day now. And that brings me to ADSB, which is sort of the technology bit that I wanted to talk to this group about. ADSB stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, but nobody calls it that or probably even knows what that means. But basically what it is you'll see in the center of this panel here, and this is the plane that I fly. It's a Cessna 182. It's a 4-seater, and it's at Santa Barbara Airport. And this screen here is a GPS, and it's used for navigation. It is connected to what we call a transponder, which is on the bottom here of the panel, of the stack, as you'd say. And so the nice thing about this modern technology is that the GPS allows the pilot to know where his airplane is. And someone had a great idea and said, well, if the pilot and the airplane both know where they are, why doesn't the airplane tell other airplanes and air traffic controllers where they are? And so ADSB, the broadcast in ADSB, means that the airplane is always sending out its position. On boats, they call it AIS, and that allows ships to avoid each other at sea. And in the air, ADSB allows other aircraft to see one another, know exactly where they are to avoid collision, and allows radar controllers to know exactly where the aircraft is and what they're dealing with. So the cool thing about ADSB is that it's an open system and anyone can track airplanes with it. And this is a website developed by the Santa Barbara Wireless Foundation at sbwireless.org. And this QR code will bring you there as well. And it allows you in the community to see where the airplanes are, where they're flying, where they came from, what speed they're at, what altitude they're at. That's all information that's available in this ADSB broadcast from these airplanes. And if you've ever used flight tracking, like is it FlightAware and Radar 24, there's a bunch of apps in the App Store that let you do something similar to this. Many of them are delayed they can be up to a couple minutes, where it'll show that the aircraft is, say, over the harbor and you're standing at the beach and you're like, I don't see that aircraft. And it's way beyond because of that delay. With the Santa Barbara Wireless Foundation's tracking system, it's all live. So what you see, if it's flying over your house on the map, you could look out a window and you would see it over the top. And it's as a result of different receivers that are placed around the county at a handful of locations. One's on Santa Cruz Island, the other at Santa Ynez Peak. And they allow us to see from Monterey to Mexico, basically. And we can track these airplanes, and we can see what their flight patterns look like. And if there's something interesting happening, like a presidential visit or a firefighting activity, oftentimes, even just military training, you hear those ospreys with the transition from helicopters to fixed wing, so like rotorcraft to airplanes. And they're really loud when they fly over. Fortunately, they don't fly too often, but it is cool to see them if you're into airplanes. You'll see those show up. Oftentimes they're called something like Rudy, or if they have like a name that sounds cute like that, it's probably a military aircraft. Otherwise, it'll just list what it is. On the right side here, it says, we've got JetBlue, United, SkyWest, American Airlines, and you can see the different aircraft that are coming in and how they're flying. So it's another tool to use for members of the community as well to see what's going on. When I hear that helicopter flying overhead, you could click on that helicopter and see, oh, it's, a contractor. They often will show utility, such and such aeronautical utility contractor, and they're probably doing something for Edison or PG&E. So the way that system works, and Bill was so kind as to bring one of these in, but what's pretty cool is that you think aviation, usually everything in aviation is orders of magnitude of thousands, right? Things are just super expensive when it comes to planes and boats, anything that flies or floats. And this is actually a very inexpensive device that uses a Raspberry Pi single board computer and some USB dongles and a pretty generic antenna. And anyone could pretty much set something like this up for probably much less than $100 and pick up signals from aircraft and feed them to a map like this live. Now, you don't need to do that because the Wireless Foundation has done that and makes this available publicly. But this information isn't a secret, and it's not anything that the Wireless Foundation is tuned into that anyone without this capabilities would be able to do themselves. So I'll pass this around. It's basically a hobbyist ADS-B receiver, and together. I'll bring this up because I thought it would be cool to see what's happening. What's happening on the in the air over Santa Barbara right now? So I'll bring this up and we can see like. This will show you if we click on. If I click on an aircraft that's right here, an airplane that's about to depart runway 25. So you can see it's turning onto the runway as we speak. It says GND, which means ground, and it says SKW 3841. So it's SkyWest 3841. They're operating as a contractor for Delta, and you can tell that just by looking at the picture over here on the right side, and you'll see that someone captured a picture of it in the air at some point and posted it alongside that the registration number. So this airplane's about to take off, and if you're at the airport, that's what you would see looking out the window of the terminal. You'd see this airplane getting up to speed, and be able to know that, hey, that's a Delta flight, a SkyWest flight. And if we zoom out, we'll see other aircraft that are possibly inbound for Santa Barbara. Here's a Cessna 206. And the little icons actually show you like the size of the airplane. So you can see here's a huge Delta Airlines flight, and it looks like a jet. And then the smaller planes actually look like the outline of a all general aviation airplane. So if that interests you, I encourage you to check out that website. It's sbwireless.org. I think I had it up on the screen here. Yeah, there's the QR code for that as well.
Also, you might mention that the color is the altitude of the airplane.
Yeah, so the green, as they're green, it means that they're lower. And then the red and purple are airplanes that are way up high. So that gives you a clue as to where you should be looking in the sky when you see one of those. And it's amazing, planes that depart from Los Angeles, they're really high by the time they get to Santa Barbara, and many of them are headed right out over the ocean to Hawaii or to the South Pacific somewhere.
So all of the information being displayed there is coming through that system right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Question?
Well, the other cool thing is you can be sitting in an airliner with internet access in the airliner running ADS-B and see your own plane and the airplanes you're looking out the window at.
Yeah.
Because you'll see, in about 2 minutes, there's going to be a plane that's going to fly right by us. And you can then see it live. I mean, literally from your own window, but you're given sort of a preview by running Flight Radar 24 or something.
Yeah. So I find this stuff just to be really interesting, and I love the technology of it. I like the fact that you can build something like that for $100 and start exploring the airwaves and the skies over your house. So I did a YouTube video about it that, again, another QR code for you if you wanted to check it out. It's a bit longer than the ones I showed, so I figured, well, if folks are interested, they can watch it on their own time and think it's just under 20 minutes. But I go through about 85 years of aviation navigation technology in this video. And there's some things that were in use 80 years ago today that are still in use today by pilots and are a great backup system. And I go into more detail on that in this video. But with that, I will open the floor to any questions there's anything that I addressed that you want me to go into more detail on, I'd be happy to do that.
So you mentioned arrivals, trying to mitigate some of the arrivals by creating some new approaches. The airlines do have their own proprietary approaches.
Yeah, we were talking
which are helpful when they do them. But we do have departures that would actually mitigate it quite a bit. So there's 2 published departures that call for runway 2 immediate left turn after runway 25 departure. That would help.
Elwood,
yeah. Help, Elwood and Western Galena quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we're running into a little bit of a wall because LA Center, which before 6 a.m., the tower here doesn't open until 6 a.m. So before the tower opens here, LA Center, which is actually a facility in Palmdale, controls, manages the aircraft, or the air traffic in Santa Barbara. And there are, like I say, 2 departures that they could issue that would call for that immediate left turn.
They're just hesitant to issue those. Is that...
For some reason, they are balking, and we're trying to get some unbalking efforts to get them to issue those departures. No big deal. I mean, they've been published for years, and they just don't use them. And with daily operations, they're not really usable because of the amount of traffic increases, and it would take them into the path of incoming airplanes. But at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, it shouldn't be a problem. So anyway, that's an effort we're currently underway.
Also on that front, you talked about one of the north-south runways is going to close down, but it was occurring to me that, since that goes out over the ocean, if one of those runways was extended or widened such that it could handle commercial traffic, you would get in and out over the ocean quickly and not have to do the over More Mesa over Western.
There's no place to extend it.
Yeah, there's an airport in the, I think it's in the Middle East somewhere, but they built a runway over an ocean, and it was done, but it was billions of dollars. So it's unlikely to happen here.
Why is there no room to the north?
There's
Fairview and Fairview is right there.
Yeah, you really wouldn't be able to. There's barely enough room for a small plane to kind of come in and turn and line up and land. But
401 and Hollister.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're kind of boxed in. Our biggest assets, the ocean and the mountains, are sort of our.
I have a question. This is Frank DeMarco. You mentioned earlier while you have that slide up on the screen, I heard you mention larger aircraft. I have 2 questions. One, what do you mean by larger aircraft? Is that in the forecast? And 2, would that involve an extension of any runway?
There's no plans for an extension of any runway. And when I say larger aircraft, forgive me, but I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who flies an airplane that weighs less than 3,000 pounds. So your everyday driving car is probably heavier than my airplane is. So when I say larger, I mean larger than my airplane. But larger aircraft, I realize, I should tune this for the general public, because larger to you means like a 747 or a 777 aircraft or something like that. And no, there's no plans for those to come into Santa Barbara. If anything, the newer aircraft, I forget the designator, maybe one of the other pilots in the room can remember, but there's a new Delta aircraft that's been coming in and out of Santa Barbara that's actually a bit quieter than some of the the older airplanes. And so that is, I think we'll see a move toward actually some of the airplanes that come in here in the future being quieter than the ones that we're hearing now, like the traditional 737s and the Airbus A17s or A19s that come in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, the question is because of capacity of the airplane, that also indicating in the future Santa Barbara doesn't have a direct flight from major city because of you have to transfer. That's the.
Well, there's a flight now. I think it's possible that without getting larger airplanes, that Santa Barbara could see flights to more further destinations east. We already have a flight now from Santa Barbara on Delta to Atlanta, Georgia. And so that's, as far as I'm aware, one of the furthest that the Santa Barbara airport has ever had as far as a destination on a commercial service.
Used to do Chicago.
They used to do Chicago.
Atlanta's further.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Atlanta's a little further, yeah.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, I think it's possible without seeing necessarily larger airplanes or more noise impact, more community impact, more convenient flights. It's certainly, one doesn't rely on the other. We don't need to make the airport larger in order to get more convenient routes.
The flip side of that, though, is that in order to make connections at those far away,
you need to leave early.
You need to leave early, otherwise you're not making.
Otherwise, you're stuck in
That's
Atlanta.
That's why they're doing these 5:15 flights, so they can get to Atlanta or Denver, or whatever the place, and then connect to other. So, that's the problem.
Any other questions?
And over the, and I did in the weekend, sometimes one, my house is on the other side of 101 or opposite. It's near Patterson. I was told when we bought a house, that's not the route for any airplane, but I did hear some noise and I saw a small airplane on the sky. So I was wondering if there's any different routes for a small airplane.
So the large airplane, like commercial airliners, tend to follow established routes. They're not going to fly north of the field under normal circumstances, and wouldn't be on the north side of Hollister unless there was some deviation or whatnot. But small planes pretty much can go where they would like, where the pilot feels that they need to go in order to land. And in the case of north of Hollister, I'm kind of surprised that they said that there was no aircraft over there, because that would be where airplanes are coming in, like on the can you guys see my, yeah, kind of the blue dot here, an airplane coming in from the west who was going to land on one of the north-south runways would fly in like this and then turn and land on the runway going like that. So that would be a normal flight path for landing aircraft on the north-south runways when they're landing toward the water.
The tower gives explicit instructions, follow the freeway. So the aircraft are going to follow the freeway for what's called a right down to 1-5. So it's not like they can say, let's make this up where we're going to land. I mean, it is a controlled airport. So, but that's the typical instructions. And actually from the east as well, go to follow the freeway for 1-5.
Something happened with my Zoom, and it, in the middle of the meeting, decided to install updates. But that's okay, because I don't really need my slides anymore.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, Frank. You're on the screen. Can you say anything about the jet bridge collapse at the airport?
Yeah. So two things that I would, we haven't received any kind of, we've got a brief post-mortem from the airport director, but I think there'll be more official disclosure at the next airport commission meeting, possibly even in advance of that. But two things to take away from that as someone who flies in and out of Santa Barbara Airport would be, one, that would be the circumstances that led to that failure were not things that would happen when you as a passenger would be walking on the jet bridge. They were doing maintenance on the jet bridge, and it was, to quote the airport director, unfortunately avoidable. So I think we'll learn more exactly what that means, but there's no concern as a passenger walking on it that you would be injured from a similar kind of failure, that this had to do with the maintenance that was being done and wouldn't affect any of the other jet bridges that were in use. And the jet bridge that, while the maintenance was being done, was closed. There was no one on it. And the only people who were injured were the people performing the maintenance. But if you have other questions, I had asked Chris, the airport director, about that. I said, if I'm asked about that, what would you like me to say? And he said, well, the information that we received on day one is very different than the information that we received on day 4. Because after you talk to people and the dust settles and you start to gather the facts, you realize that the initial impressions, when you have a pretty major incident like that, often the facts come together later to paint a little bit of a different picture. So once we get kind of all that information, I think there'll be more disclosure. And once we're certain that what we know is true. But if you have other questions and you want to talk to Chris directly about anything, I've got his cards here as well as my cards for Pathways to Invention, which is the documentary that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So feel free to come up afterward, and I'm happy to give you one or both of those cards. Yes.
Our group used to meet at the Elephant Bar, so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to the food truck concept.
Yeah, so it's kind of a cool idea. The Elephant Bar is, the building has been not used for several years. And so the condition of the building is poor. The commercial kitchen in it is probably unusable. It would be unlikely to pass any kind of health department examination in its current state. So someone, a tenant has entered into a relatively short-term lease, I think it's just a couple of years, to, rather than rehab that commercial kitchen, because ultimately that building is slated for demolition as part of redevelopment of the field. So the airport fence will come back. That area will become part of the general aviation apron or ramp area. And so it will basically become part of the, where airplanes can taxi and they can actually be inside the fence. And out of that, we'll have a new airport administration building, new fixed base operator buildings. So it doesn't make sense to rehab that kitchen at a cost of 6 or 7 figures when it's slated for demolition. But we also, nobody wants to continue to look at that building in its current condition. So we're fortunate to find someone who had an interesting idea, and we'll see how well it plays out. But to take the building and instead of rehabbing the kitchen, bring in food trucks that have health department approved kitchens on wheels already, and then have a single point of sale inside. And then that you can order from any one of the half dozen food trucks, and then everything will be served through the restaurant, but the food will be made in the food trucks. And that way it kind of gives you a public market kind of feel. Everything's through one controlled point of sale, and we get a nice operating restaurant out of something that, we were gonna just end up looking at until it was destroyed. So I think it's slated to open in late September, I think. So yeah, I mean, maybe the end of this month, we'll see what happens. I think they originally were trying to do it by the end of the summer, and they're probably going to miss that by a few weeks, but I think they're pretty close to being on track to open.
I noticed you didn't say anything about the FBO redevelopment project.
I didn't talk about it because I wasn't talking to pilots, but I probably would if I was going to talk to pilots. Is there something you wanted to add about what's happening?
No, just that the whole E-bar going away and the current administration is all part of that. It's going to be a large amount of construction going on at the airport for the people that fly little planes like Levi and I fly, and up to the really fancy executive jets. Huge changes.
So that's sort of, I mean, it's unrelated to, but probably happening at the same time as the terminal improvement project is this FBO redevelopment project for general aviation, non-commercial service that's happening on the north side of the field. And that's another nice sort of side effect, or I guess it was probably part of the plan, is that now all of the airline services on the south side of the airport and all of the general aviation is on the north side of the airport. And that keeps big planes and little planes from crisscrossing each other as much. And so that will sort of be complete when this FBO redevelopment happens in the next 5 years or so. Yeah. Yes.
One question is, I do like everyone likes this Santa Barbara Airport. Are anyone concerned about the water treatment nearby? Because I get there, might be, some people might spill something there. Is that part of the airport? Is you're the one operating airport, and there's any concern?
Concern just from like people don't like the smell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the smell. It's Goleta Sanitary District, so it's not part of the city. There's, I think, little coordination between the two agencies, the airport department and the Goleta Sanitary District, as far as what they can do about the mitigation of the smell. It just depends on which way the wind is blowing. It tends to be worse. Fortunately, the prevailing wind is out of the west, which means that usually the winds are bringing that smell away from the airport terminal. But when you come in at night and it's becalmed or there's a slight east breeze, it can bring that putrid odor over to the terminal area and be an unwelcome welcome to Santa Barbara. But I mean, unfortunately, it's just, due to where the two facilities are located. Yeah. Larry.
Yeah, Levi, great talk. And one of the things that TVSB did recently was a history of the airport, and they showed how the city of Santa Barbara gained the airport land within the city limits with a strip out of the ocean, and then it comes back in. So it's really fascinating to see that map. But I was wondering, who determines whether or not the flying conditions at Santa Barbara Airport are acceptable? For instance, with fog. And because there's the choice you have to make. Take the Santa Barbara Airbus down to LAX, and that thing runs, except you have traffic. Okay, so then you have to factor in the traffic times, and especially after the fire in Malibu, you couldn't go PCH. Now you can again. Versus at Santa Barbara Airport, if you got an early morning flight and there's fog, who determines? Is there an authority at the airport that says no one's flying? Or is it the responsibility of each airline to make that decision? And then they say it's an act of God. You're stuck. There's nothing we can do because it's not a mechanical failure. It's not a fault of the airline. And so we have this, you just missed all your connections at LAX because you banked on Santa Barbara having that flight that was going to get you to LAX, think you'd make the connection at LAX versus the Santa Barbara Airbus. So I was wondering, who makes those considerations or determinations about whether or not it's flyable?
It's as observed by the pilot, right? Yeah.
So there are procedures that have specific minimums. So if you're going to do an instrument approach in runway 7, a few months ago, you have to have at least you have to be a 200-foot ceiling. So if the ceiling is less than 200 feet, you can't land. And that's everywhere. So that's not just a Santa Barbara thing. It's not really making it up. It's just simply whether the airplane has a ceiling enough for aircraft to be able to come in using a missile.
Okay, can I be a devil's advocate here? Yeah. Okay. The devil's advocate is the airlines are out to make money. And they are given a safe harbor if it's an act of God. So if it's weather, so we're in SFO, and the flight to Santa Barbara canceled because of weather. All right. And the same thing has happened in Austin, trying to get to LAX, canceled. There was another airline in Austin that was flying, Southwest was flying to LAX, and they did it at exactly the same time out of Austin. So United did not fly to LAX from Austin, but Delta did.
Well, it's the pilot's
and Southwest did.
And the pilot's discretion. So it's not they're not coordinating with one another. They're just looking at their pre-flight information and saying,
yeah, they're looking at the number of passengers and they're saying, we only got 2 passengers on this flight. Screw them. We're just gonna cancel the flight. These guys got to get a hotel room in Austin.
It's incredibly disruptive for them to not be able to get an airplane in here.
Yeah,
so
they need it here.
Exactly the opposite. It screws them if they can't get in here. So then they don't have the flight going out the next morning. So they have every incentive to try to be able to make it in because it's a mess if they can't.
I think if an airplane breaks and it's also bad weather, they'd like to blame it on the bad weather and not the airplane breaking because one requires them to pay for hotel rooms and another doesn't. But in the circumstance you're talking about, I think that's bordering on conspiracy that they are not flying airplanes because, you know, they only have 2 people on them.
They have specific
for profit, because you can see the difference in the regimes, you know, where airports in Europe have the European Union protections for passengers. Okay. And what so I've been reimbursed because I was bumped from a flight similar to what happens at Denver because of the altitude and the temperature.
Yeah.
I've been bumped from flights at Denver. Okay. Well, whose responsibility is that? What kind of reimbursement do I get when somebody makes a determination like that? And so just being sort of the devil's advocate and experiencing many different regulatory regimes, the United States is really quite a bit behind in terms of passenger reimbursements as compared, for instance, to the European Union.
That's probably true, yeah. Outside of the purview of the Airport Commission, however.
Yeah, my other question would be, what is the actual, let's say, decision-making authority of the commission? It's only recommendations, right, to the city council, and it would be the city council that would make any final determinations.
Yeah, typically, so there's this statutory amount for leases that can be approved by the Airport Commission and certain other functions. However, you know, for most actions outside of that, the city council is looking for, the reason they appoint the Airport Commission is to try to reduce the workload for a lot of these things. So if the Airport Commission is opposed to something, which on my term hasn't happened much, Paul's term, it was highly contentious, many issues in years past. So the city council is looking to the airport commission for, well, why was this opposed? What's going on here? That way they don't have to necessarily get involved in every decision. So if we're saying, yes, this is good, yes, this is good, they're going to give it far less scrutiny than something that comes in with 3 opposed, even though it passes. So that's sort of the function, is to be there as eyes and ears for elected governments, so that they can keep their hands on the tiller of what's happening in these various departments around the city. Like I said, harbor, airport, parks, they all have a board or a commission, and those boards and commissions are looking at the nuts and bolts so that the city council doesn't have to. Yeah.
How many people are on the commission, and what is the criteria to be a member of it?
Good question. 7, and so some commissions have like a requirement, like the Architectural Board of Review, you need to be an architect. With the Santa Barbara Airport Commission, you need to have be either a resident of the city or the county of Santa Barbara, and that's really the minimum statutory requirement to be on the commission. That said, I think it's helpful to have an aviation background, although I would say it's probably more helpful to have a business background and a real commercial real estate background, because much of what the Airport Commission deals with has to do with real estate and commercial leases and things of that nature, as much as the aviation related things. So we have a number of pilots on the commission. I think the council likes to appoint pilots to the Airport Commission because they'll know a lot of the things that we've talked about today. But then also we have non-pilots who have banking backgrounds, real estate backgrounds, business backgrounds as well. That's why I brought that slide up at the beginning about just this sheer number of square footage that the airport is a landlord for. And much of it has nothing to do with aviation. Dune coffee roasters, direct relief, Impulse Communications. All these are big businesses that lease land and or buildings from the airport, but don't provide aviation support. Larry.
After the fiber optic cable cut, what measures is the Airport Commission or the airport considering as backup for telecommunications?
You didn't originally ask me about the bridge collapse, but I thought you would. But you're asking me all of them.
Cell phones.
So interestingly, we've got one place, was that on De La Vina near Alomar, I think. They were working on that bridge and they cut a fiber optic cable. And who would have thought that only the critical and emergency services would be affected? I mean, you'd think that the idea was that it was supposed to be that those were the most resilient. It turns out they were the least resilient in this case. From what I understand, and this did not affect the airport administration or the city at all, really. What it affected was the FAA and the contract that the federal government had for communications. I don't know if that contract was with Frontier, who owned the fiber, or through a third party that then leased through Frontier. That's unclear. We haven't been advised at the Airport Commission about all of those details. But my understanding is that they had a contract for something that provided redundancy, and ultimately the redundancy was not provided for one reason or another. And when that cable was cut, there was no alternate working path for backup communications. And that's, I mean, I say this as an individual, not as someone who's learned something that you all couldn't find out. This isn't any inside information from the Airport Commission, but my understanding is that the FAA has over the years offloaded a lot of their owned networks. Like you go drive by the tower and you see it has microwave dishes up on the tower, antennas that were used for point-to-point communications. And over the years, those FAA-owned facilities have been abandoned in favor of subcontracted communications facilities. So as the FAA loses control over various facilities, that means they have less ability to, determine how and when things are done with them. So this is likely a result of the fact that that has been subcontracted to a communications contractor, and the FAA simply had no control over what they did in order to provide that redundancy. And that also, as you probably know, affected county 911 And yeah,
Yeah, SpaceX launch, it got
and the
in a second.
yeah, yeah, the SpaceX launch was because LA Center and SoCal approach wouldn't have been able to get the radar information from Santa Barbara Airport, so they wouldn't be able to see who's in the sky. They wouldn't have been getting the ADS-B feed. In fact, you would have had more information going to the website I showed you about what traffic was in the sky than the FAA would have at that point after the fiber cut. So.
Levi, I've got a question on one of your earlier slides was about the number of passenger departures per year.
Yeah.
And you had the, I wonder if what projections you've made and if policies such as climate change policies, net zero policies, have any effect on those projections into the future.
I'm not aware of any projections for passenger count. Are you, Paul?
I have the projections, the FAA. Yes, we
The
do.
FAA does, but the city doesn't produce any projections.
We don't do that.
No. What
The FAA has a projection.
Yeah.
It's in the master plan also. There's some projections in there.
Yeah.
But how do you know how big? How do you know how big to expand the terminal if you don't have some sort of a projection on how much is going to be used in the future?
Yeah, no, there must be in the master plan, like you said. It's not in our annual reports, but it's in the master plan. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. I don't have it with me today, but if you visit flysba.com, there's a ton of, that's where I got these videos from. There's not all of the airport commission packets, but there's a lot of information on there about future projects, completed projects. So I would look on there to see if you can find answers to your questions about any of the projects. They detail quite a bit about this terminal improvement project and have blueprints for the plans and all of that. I have a big giant, printout of what that blueprint looks like. But yeah, as far as the projections, that I believe they're pulled from, like Paul said, from the FAA, but we don't have any in our annual reports that we get.
And with all the emphasis on electric vehicles and such, I know people working on electric planes. I'm just wondering if policies on net zero into the future, I guess just in your opinion, is that going to have much, if any, effect on air travel?
It would have to have a national effect. A lot of what the airport, the flights into and out of Santa Barbara Airport are regulated by the FAA. So the city couldn't tomorrow say, oh, we're not allowing flights that aren't electric airplanes out of Santa Barbara Airport, for example, because we would be in violation of grant assurances for the money that we've received for the terminal improvement, for runway expansion that was completed a number of years ago, and any number of other FAA grants that were received by the city. So it would be very difficult to implement that kind of sweeping change at the city level for operations at the airport.
Has anything like that been addressed in terms of future planning, to your knowledge?
As far as, so one thing I do know that's been addressed as far as alternative fuels for aircraft is there has been some preliminary planning for electric vertical takeoff and landing rotorcraft at the field. And an area of the field has been identified for, they call it eVTOL aircraft to take off and land from. And so that could provide depending on how they were charged, carbon neutral energy source for, say, for example, commuters to Los Angeles, if that technology materializes. And I think we're very much in the infancy of that, and what's going to drive that is actual availability of that technology. Once that technology becomes economically viable, then the city is poised to develop an area of the airport that's been identified for the purpose of supporting eVTOL.
This would be very small numbers, though.
Yeah, it would be very small. You wouldn't replace, a 737 with eVTOL. And then you also have to deal with the noise issues because they tend to be loud. Helicopters are much louder than fixed wing, and they tend to be slower, so they linger, making their noise longer. So there's considerations with that as well.